What happens when an elderly veteran writes a letter just to be heard, and even school children laugh at him? No one expected that the last signature on his letter would change the entire school and make a general stand up. It was an ordinary letter from a lonely old man, forgotten in the principal's desk drawer. They laughed at it, but when one student opened it and saw the signature at the bottom, something began at the school that forever changed everyone there. The letter lay on the edge of the teacher's desk, slightly crumpled, printed on an old inkjet printer. The paper was yellowed, the layout was crooked, and the title was in capital letters, as if it were from the 90s. The signature at the bottom was illegible. Either the pen had leaked or the hand had been shaking. The teachers laughed. "What a hack," snorted the head teacher, putting on her glasses. "I ask you to reconsider your attitude toward historical memory." Seriously? Sincerely, retired senior lieutenant. The gym teacher laughed. "He retired himself 3 times. And he has more grammatical errors than an 8th grade essay." "Poor old man, he probably confused the newspaper with the ministry," added the biology teacher. The letter was passed from hand to hand like a note at a boring teachers' meeting. But one person wasn't laughing, the school security guard. He stood by the door, leaning on the table, watching. His face was expressionless, but the hand holding the plastic cup of tea was shaking. He had seen this letter before. He recognized the font and the signature. He left without saying a word. An hour later, a man in a dark blue coat with an emblem on the lapel entered the school. He didn't explain anything. He just walked into the teacher's room, put something on the table, and froze. And everyone else froze with him. "What a strange letter," muttered the young history teacher, putting the sheet of paper aside. "It's as if someone was screaming from deep within and we can't hear it." The security guard heard her. He turned around, already on his way out. "You don't need to hear it," he said quietly. "You just need to know that it was there, even if you never saw it." He left without looking back. Behind him, laughter rang out again. Viktor Sergeyevich Platonov lived on the outskirts, in a 5-story building where the mailboxes had long since lost their lids and the stairwell smelled of mold, tobacco, and old paint. His name was crossed out on the sign by the elevator doors. No one had bothered to erase it. No one needed to. He woke up early, out of habit, although he hadn't set an alarm in a long time. He woke up because he had been dreaming. A vague, short dream. A column, dust, a boy in a helmet nearby, and a sharp bang somewhere to the side. A hand stretched out in the air, and a scream. Not with his voice, an internal scream. In the morning, he drank tea. No sugar. He looked at the radio, which picked up nothing but static. He turned it on anyway, so the silence wouldn't consume him. On the wall is a frame with a faded photograph. He is in uniform, fit, with a hint of a smile. He was 26 then. Now he is over 70. The apartment is the same as it was 30 years ago. Even the rag pillow on the chair by the window. Viktor Sergeyevich is a former military communications officer, a retired senior lieutenant. He is not a hero. He is not a legend. He is just one of those who pulled cables out of icy water and did not cry out when his fingers froze black. His pension is modest. It is enough for medicine, but only sometimes for food. But he did not complain. That wasn't the worst of it. The worst was when they stopped listening to him. He wrote letters to the local newspaper, to the mayor's office. Once, he even wrote to the television station. He suggested holding a memorial day at the school, an informal gathering without speeches, just so that someone could simply talk about what honor is. No response, no greeting. He wrote his last letter with a trembling hand, with typos, but from the heart. He printed it on an old Canon printer with a cartridge that was almost dry, and he sent it to the most ordinary school. The one that had been built on the site of a former military school. He didn't expect a reply. He just didn't want to die completely unnoticed. Every morning he went downstairs, sat on a bench by the entrance, and looked at the schoolyard. Sometimes he greeted the children. Rarely did anyone answer. Time passed him by. One day, a girl from the 7th grade, red-haired, wearing a jacket with patches, came up to him and asked, "Were you really in the military?" "Yes," he replied. "Why did you write us a letter?" He paused. Then he said, "So you don't become like me. Silent. While there's still time to talk." She didn't understand, but she nodded and walked away. A day later, he received a rejection letter from the principal. No signature, no explanation. Just, "The school cannot guarantee participation in the proposed initiative." Dry. As if he had offered to sell vacuum cleaners. He folded the letter. He put it in a pile with the others. Then he went back to the yard. Everyone already knew about him. The strange old man at the school who writes to everyone. He didn't react, but inside, he felt cold. It all started with a photo. A note appeared on the school website in the news section. The students of Class 8B wrote letters to the future. The best one is by Ilya S. Topic: What I definitely don't want to be. Viktor Sergeyevich saw it by accident. His downstairs neighbor, unable to bear it any longer, brought him his tablet. "Look, this is about you. Your letters are being used again." He clicked on the link. The screen flashed. And there was the text. Where he expected something about his generation or dreams, he saw, "I don't want to be someone who sits outside school in a dusty jacket and writes pathetic letters so that someone will remember him. It's like begging for respect. It's humiliating." The photo below was blurry but recognizable. It was him, sitting on a bench. Behind him were children with school bags. The caption read, "Local veteran, author of the letters." He didn't react right away. He just turned off the tablet. Then he got up, went to the kitchen, sat down, and stared at the empty mug for a long time. He didn't cry. He froze. All he could think was, "So that's how it is now. Now it's just mockery." But inside, where everything had been silent for so long, something clicked. He took out a stack of old letters. He found the first one. He looked at the signature. The signature he had written as the last imprint of his memory. Platonov V.S. Senior Lieutenant, retired, 17th Separate Signal Company, 1973 to 1991. He sighed, and he thought, if they laugh so easily. Then someone has to explain to them that it wasn't a joke. He didn't leave the house for 3 days. The curtains were closed. The pot of soup remained on the stove, frozen in a greasy film. The radio was silent. The cat from the street, which he fed every evening, no longer meowed at the door. It had gotten used to there being no food. He printed out the boy's letter. He put it next to his own. He read it over and over again. "I don't want to become..." It sounded like a sentence. He went through all his letters, old and new. The words were simple. About honor, duty, respect. Some were dry, some had mistakes. No poetry, no fancy phrases. Just the voice of a man who didn't want to disappear without a trace. "Maybe it really is time to keep quiet," he said aloud. His voice sounded strange, hoarse. He opened the window. He looked at the schoolyard. Children were playing there. Some were running with phones, some with chips. A girl with headphones walked by. She didn't notice, didn't recognize him. He sat down. He closed his eyes. His chest felt empty. No resentment, no anger, only fatigue. The kind that comes not to the body, but to the soul. His sleep was fragmented. A column, wires, a crash. He woke up at 4 in the morning in a cold sweat. He turned on the light. And for the first time in many years, he took out that very box with his belongings. There was an old dog tag, a yellowed ID card, and a letter. One, real, from the Minister of Defense, with signatures, with seals. He had received it once, as a token of gratitude, for an operation that was not reported in the newspapers. Short, dry, but with that signature that could not be mistaken for anything else. He stared at it for a long time. And then, suddenly, abruptly, he stood up. A day later, he returned to the school. Not for class, not because he had been invited. On his own. He was holding an envelope, sealed. Inside was his letter, the very one, plus a copy of the thank you note, plus his signature. He handed it to the principal. The principal was embarrassed and didn't take it right away. "I'm not expecting an apology," Victor said. "But I ask that before you laugh, you find out who you're dealing with." The principal nodded awkwardly. He looked around. "All right, I'll pass it on." "Not to you," Victor interrupted. "To the student. Let him read it aloud. In front of the whole class." He left, slowly with his back straight. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like a starting point. The next day, a folder appeared on the table in the school library. It was simple, with a transparent cover. Inside were 2 sheets of paper. The first was a letter from Viktor Sergeyevich, with that same trembling signature. The second was an official form with a coat of arms. It was a letter of gratitude. Underneath was a bold, confident signature, Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. No one explained who had left the folder. But soon the history teacher saw it. Then the deputy head, and then the student himself. He read it, slowly. At first he grunted, then he fell silent. A day later, a request appeared in the principal's office. "Is it possible to hold an extracurricular lesson with the participation of Viktor Sergeyevich Platonov?" The request was not from the veteran. It was from Class 8B. Before he started writing letters, Viktor Sergeyevich went to the old train station every Saturday. Not because he needed to go anywhere. He just sat on a bench by the 4th platform and watched the trains. Once a month, a young woman in a light-colored coat would come there. She carried flowers, always the same, asters and cornflowers. She approached the memorial plaque. "In memory of the fallen signalmen of the 17th Company," laid down the bouquet and stood silently. They did not speak. He did not know her name. But he felt that she was one of those who remember. Once, returning home after an unsuccessful letter to the editor, he found a note at his door. No name. The handwriting was feminine and clear. "I know who you are. You are not alone. Just keep talking. Someone will hear you." He kept it between the pages of a radio engineering reference book. Between the lines about receivers and transmitters, it was a reminder that his signal had not been lost. And now, when everything was spinning, the letters, the student, the school, he came back to the station. The woman was already there. This time she turned around. Her gaze was calm and direct. "Your voice has finally been heard," she said. He nodded. "I hope it's not too late." "It doesn't matter when. What matters is that you didn't remain silent." They stood there together. No fuss, no explanations. 2 people connected by memory. On the way back, he stopped at a pastry shop near the bus stop and bought 2 candies in wrappers, the kind that were around during the Soviet era. The next day, he gave them to the girl who had once asked about the former soldier. "For the letter?" he said. "Just because." She smiled, without a word, and she went to school. He stood there. And for the first time in a long time, he felt that he was doing something worthwhile. The week after that letter passed uneventfully. The school principal agreed to the lesson, reluctantly, with reservations. The history teacher, the one who had snorted at first, volunteered to teach it. "We have to make up for it somehow," she said, not looking him in the eye. Viktor Sergeyevich came in his usual clothes. No medals, no suit. Only the badge of the 17th Company, faded but pinned over his heart. The classroom was full. Even those who usually copied each other's work sat quietly. In the front row was Ilya, the author of the letter. He began to speak simply, without preparation. He talked about how he had kept in touch while the wires were being connected under mortar fire. He talked about how silence can be louder than a gunshot. He talked about how memory is not words, but how you look into a person's eyes. "I'm not a hero. I just didn't run away," he said. "And if anyone is laughing now, it means it can still be explained." When he finished, no one applauded. They just sat there. For the first time, without phones or chewing gum, they were silent. After class, he was invited to the teacher's room. There was tea, gingerbread, and cautious phrases. "Thank you for taking the time. I'm sorry if It was important." He nodded. He didn't condemn them. He just looked at the same people who had laughed before and saw that they were looking at him differently now. A day later, he got a call from the local newspaper. "Can we write an article?" He agreed. A short article was published. An ordinary man with an extraordinary letter. The photo was not staged. He was sitting on a bench, in profile, with a thermos. The caption read, "Viktor Platonov, Communications Officer." He didn't shout, but they heard him. There were few comments, but among them was one from a user with the nickname mean.oboron.rf. Just one emoji and 3 words. "We remember you, comrade." Then letters came from school children, handwritten, on paper. "Thank you for not giving up. Now I know why my grandfather is silent. You're the first person who didn't read from a script." He put them in the same folder where he once kept the rejections. The folder grew thicker. Not from pain, but from meaning. A week later, he got a call from a TV channel. They offered him an interview. He refused. "I've already said everything," he replied quietly. The right people heard it. But the story didn't die down. Other schools picked it up. They started holding meetings with veterans, not just famous ones, ordinary ones, those who were still around, all because of one letter that had been laughed at. Now it was read aloud, at assemblies, without ridicule. One day, the same security guard caught up with him on the stairs, the one who had stood silently while everyone laughed. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't know how to stand up for you then. But now I know how not to remain silent." "It's only too late at a funeral," Victor replied. "And we're still alive." And he walked on, with his back straight. Viktor Sergeyevich sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the school children leaving class. Several of them waved, not out of politeness, but sincerely. Someone shouted, "Hello, Uncle Victor!" He nodded in response and smiled. There was an envelope in the mailbox. The paper was thick and white, like a diploma. On the back was a coat of arms. Not a fake, but the real thing. He went home and sat down at the table. He carefully opened it. One sheet, no frills. "Dear Viktor Sergeyevich, your letter, as well as its public discussion, have reached us. We express our gratitude for preserving the spirit of military brotherhood. Signed, Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation." It was real, not a scan, not a photocopy. He read it 3 times, and for the first time in a long time, he cried, silently, without sobbing, just tears like rain on an inner wall. He picked up a pen. He wanted to reply. Then he changed his mind. He went to the school. He approached the security guard. "Can I come in? Just for 5 minutes?" "Of course." A new sheet appeared on the notice board. Lesson of Remembrance. Host Viktor Platonov. Topics: truth, dignity, silence. And that same evening, there was another envelope in the mailbox. No stamp. Handwritten. He opened it. The handwriting was familiar. It was from the girl from that first conversation. "My mom said that people like you are real. I'm not afraid to listen to silence anymore." And then the doctor arrived, the district doctor, without a white coat, in a jacket. He said that the cancer center had called. There were changes in the test results he had submitted in the winter. "You will need to undergo further examination. It is advisable not to delay." He understood immediately. He nodded. He thanked him. When the doctor left, he sat down by the window again, and he realized now they could hear him. but there was probably less time than he thought. 2 days after the doctor's visit, he went to the cancer center for an appointment. The line was long, and the air smelled of alcohol and fatigue. He was called in quickly. The doctor was young, wearing glasses and focused, a folder with results, a silent monitor. "There are suspicions. A biopsy will be necessary." "How soon?" Victor asked. "A week, maybe 2. It's best not to delay." He thanked him and left. It was warm outside, but he felt chilled, not from the cold, but from an inner emptiness. He already knew. It wasn't fear of death. It was fear of not having enough time to say everything he wanted to say. The next day, there was a call from the school. "We'd like to postpone the meeting," said the principal. "One of the parents complained. They said you're promoting political issues and involving the children. You know how it is." He nodded even though the other person couldn't see him. "I understand." He hung up. The old silence returned. The silence he had almost conquered. Now it rang again, like after a bombardment. Not a sound, but a ringing in his ears. He went into a store. The young cashier looked at him as if he were strange. Next to her, a boy in the jacket with "No One Cares" written on it laughed when he saw the badge. Oh, a retro grandpa. He didn't answer. He just lowered his eyes. He bought milk and bread. He left. At the bus stop, the same girl caught up with him. The one from the letter. "Why are you so sad?" He didn't know what to say. "Are they not going to let us back into school?" He sighed. Probably not everyone is ready to listen while you're still alive. "And then what when you're gone?" "Then maybe they'll remember, but not right away." That same evening, the security guard called him. "Viktor Sergeyevich, some man came to the school looking for you. He didn't show any ID. He seemed nervous. He said that old men with a military past are better off staying at home." "Did you get a good look at him?" "Not really, but he wasn't from around here." And clearly, he had an agenda. He sat by the window for a long time. He took out some old letters. He reread them. And for the first time ever, he thought, what if no one cares about any of this? What if every word is just a drop in the ocean? But then he looked up and saw the same girl standing below. She was holding a piece of paper in her hands. She raised it. In large letters, it said, "I hear you." The next day, he got up late. He didn't turn on the kettle. He just sat by the bed, quiet, not thinking, not feeling. The letters from the dresser were gone. He had put them away himself silently in a drawer. He put his veteran's ID there, too. He took off his badge and pin. It was as if he was closing a play that no one had come to see. He didn't go for a re-examination, not because he didn't want to live, but because he saw no point. The windows remained closed. The phone was turned off. Even the cat from the street stopped coming by. On the 4th day, a letter arrived. It was ordinary in a gray envelope. No stamp. On the back was a surname, Kravtsov. He didn't recognize it at first. Then he realized. His former colleague, the same one who went missing in 1994. He thought he was dead, but he was alive. The letter was short. "Vitya, I found your video through my grandson. It's really you. Don't give up. You were the voice for all of us. If you can, come. We need to talk. There's something left unsaid. Yours, Kay." He read it. Then he sat back down in the chair. He stared at the wall. No tears came. His throat was empty. He exhaled. It's too late now. But he didn't throw the letter away. He didn't sleep that night. Kravtsov's letter lay on the table. The window was open, and silence poured in like ice water. He sat in his chair, staring at the ceiling. You were the voice for all of us. Why did that hit him so hard? He didn't remember the battle, not the explosions, not the blood. But how, after the battle, the 5 of them sat in a trench, and he, a 25-year-old radio operator, read aloud a letter that had come to one of the soldiers from his sister, and the soldier cried like a child. Then, in the silence, someone said, "Write this down. We may not survive. Let someone know." He wrote it down. Since then, he wrote everything down. But who needed it? And now, decades later, it all came back in one sentence. One living voice from the past pulled him out of the pit. He walked over to the mirror. An old man, with wrinkles, gray hair, and spots on his hands. "So it wasn't for nothing," he said aloud. He turned around. He took the badge out of the drawer. He pinned it back on. Then he took out his ID. The letters, all the replies from the school children. He put batteries in the radio. He turned it on. Silence. Then a hissing sound. Then a faint, barely audible signal. An unknown wave. He listened. No words, just the fact of the signal. So someone was still transmitting. So someone was still waiting for a reply. In the morning, he put on a clean shirt. The very one he had worn when he was photographed for his combatant's ID card. He put on a windbreaker over it. On the lapel was his company badge. He gathered all the letters. He packed them neatly. He enclosed a copy of the very first one, the one that started it all. He sat down at the table. He wrote a short note. "These letters are not about me. They are voices, the ones that still echo. I was just a receiver." He put the letter in an envelope and addressed it. Ministry of Defense, Archives Department. Personal. On his way out, he called Ilya, the schoolboy. "Give this to the principal. I want to teach one last lesson, alone, without a script." "Are you sure you're ready?" "I don't know. But if I don't say it, I'll regret it." Viktor Sergeyevich stood at the blackboard. The classroom was the same. Desks, worn chairs, faded posters on life safety. Only the silence was different now. Not oppressive, but respectful. He didn't give a lecture. He just talked. 40 years ago, I was told, "You're just a transmitter, not a hero, not a boss. You're a conduit." At the time, it hurt. But now I understand. That may be the most important thing. To carry the voice forward so that it doesn't break. He took out that very folder. He took out the first letter. This was written by a student, with laughter, with contempt. But now he's here. He's listening. And that means I haven't been silent all these years for nothing. He showed the other letters to the class. "These words aren't about me. They're about us. About how memory can only be passed on if you don't expect gratitude." He looked each of them in the eye. "Who among you remembers your grandfather's voice? Who among you has heard him silent?" No one laughed. Some nodded. After class, no one left. The principal came out himself. "Viktor Sergeyevich, please accept our apologies. From all of us, we didn't know what to do." "It wasn't the right thing to do," he smiled. "The main thing is that it's not too late." Ilya approached him and held out his hand. There was no fear in his eyes. "Thank you. You made it clear that even a letter can be an act of courage." 2 days later, he received a phone call. "Viktor Sergeyevich, we are from the ministry. We received your file." To be honest, no one knew what to do with it, but one general said, "If we don't know, then we should keep it." A week later, a new display case appeared in the city museum. Voices that did not shout. There was his badge, a copy of the letter, a few lines. Radio operator, veteran, link between memory and the present. He didn't live to see the next spring. The illness finally took him, peacefully, without pain. He fell asleep in his chair by the window, holding that same radio in his hands. When his neighbors came in, he was already cold. But there was a slight smile on his lips. There were a lot of people at the funeral, more than he would have wanted. Students, teachers, strangers. Someone was holding sheets of paper, printed letters. A girl with a sign that read, "I can hear," stood with a portrait. A military man approached him, a general. Silently, he touched 2 fingers to his temple, then to his heart. He passed it on. "We accepted it," he said. Spring, a museum. Few people. In the corner, a glass display case. Inside, an old radio, a slightly worn badge, a folder with yellowed pages. Above it, a plaque. Viktor Sergeyevich Platonov, radio operator, liaison officer, veteran. A 14-year-old schoolboy stands and reads. For a long time. Silently. His mother stands nearby. "Shall we go?" He shakes his head. "I want to listen some more. There's no sound." "No," he says. "I can hear it. Only inside." And he stands there for a long time, just silently, as if waiting for a signal. If this story has left an impression on you, write the word "I remember" in the comments. Together, we will show that no voice spoken with pain and honor goes unheard. And if you also believe that even silence can make a sound, share this video.